exciting edition of the NFL Network. We are now 3 weeks away from the end of the regular season. It's hard to believe that we only got started in September and now it's already close to Christmas time, and that means we're coming to the end of the regular season, like I said before. And soon the playoffs will be here, and then the Super Bowl, and then the off season will be here upon us. And I'm just stretching this intro out here, but we're going to do things a little bit differently today. I'm going to start today off with the NFL Power Rankings for the week. So let's go ahead and put that up on the board. And as you can see here, there's a new number 1 on this list here. And I'm going to go run down the top 5 as per usual. Start off with number 5. For the first time on this list, in the top 5, the Denver Broncos make the top 5. And they do it off of a game where they didn't look their best overall, but man, that fourth quarter, when everything just came right in their favor, Indianapolis just kind of gave them the game. Jonathan Taylor fumbled the football before he reached the goal line. And of course, that trick play, which led to the Nick Bonito pick 6, his second one in the last 3 weeks. I mean, actually 2 weeks, no, because they played Cleveland Monday night a couple weeks ago, and then they had the bye week. So it was technically 2 games overall, but bottom line, the Denver Broncos are looking really good to finally break that playoff drought of theirs. Chance to make the playoffs for the first time since Peyton took them to the Super Bowl and won them the Super Bowl against Carolina almost 8 years ago. It's hard to believe, but the Broncos really have been coming into their own the last couple of weeks in general. So yeah, chance to do that tomorrow night. We'll delve into my predictions, whether or not they will actually do it or not, But let's go to number 4 on the list. The most impressive win of the week for me, number 4, the Baltimore Ravens. Granted, yes, it was against the New York Giants, and anybody could beat the New York Giants at this point, but Lamar Jackson, man. Lamar friggin' Jackson. 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. Yeah, no interceptions. Like, he threw more touchdowns than incompletions. That's one of those rare things that happens to most QBs. And, just proving more and more why he was the MVP and why it makes me really, really scared for what's coming up on Saturday. But, yeah, like I said, they did it against the New York Giants. The defense is still very much a question mark for the Baltimore Ravens in general, but the New York, when you go up against the New York Giants, that's a good test of what you have coming up over the next couple of weeks with the Steelers on Saturday and then the Texans on Christmas Day. But let's go to number 3 on the list. Maybe one of the more impressive wins of the entire week. The Green Bay Packers just going into Seattle and just completely just shredding them and taking whatever the Seahawks had going for them at that point. They looked like they were going to be the team to win the NFC West title, and then Green Bay comes in, and right from the get-go, they just pulled out all the stops and didn't stop it at any point during the game. I mean, they really put it to the Seattle Seahawks. They killed their quarterback and pretty much killed their playoff chances at that point. I mean, Jordan Love right now is red hot. They're going into a game next week where pretty much, the team they're playing against is not that great. So on paper, this should be a win-and-in scenario because next week is a win-and-in game for the Packers. If they win, they're back in the playoffs here. I don't think they're going to get the division because of the number 2 team I'm about to talk about here. But yeah, overall, very, very impressive win by the Green Bay Packers against Seattle. Number 2, let's talk about the 2 teams who win a game that could possibly be a Super Bowl preview this past week, and that was start off with number 2, the Detroit Lions, who have been the number 1 team for much of the season, and then this week, they have the Buffalo Bills come to town, and then, the Lions, they're completely shredded right now on the defensive front, which could cost them dearly when it comes to the playoffs, and especially the number 1 seed, especially with Philadelphia not too far away from them now. But give Detroit their proper credit. They did not let the Buffalo Bills just completely run over them. They tried to keep it in. They tried to keep in the game. Unfortunately, it didn't help in the end. Like I said, their defense got completely shredded. And at this point, I mean, that's going to be a big factor coming into the next 3 weeks. This has been the hottest team in the NFL all season long. And then all of a sudden, this game happens, and they've lost 16 players on defense, 16 critical players on defense, and yeah, they don't have the toughest schedule coming up to wrap the season. I mean, this week they play a really bad Chicago Bears team, and then after that, they've got the San Francisco 49ers, who are not that great, a rematch of the NFC Championship game, but their biggest competitor will be on Week 18, the Minnesota Vikings, who, as you see, are 10th on this list here in particular. I would not be shocked at all if the NFC West isn't officially decided by that point. Lions and Vikings probably is the game that wraps up this regular season on Sunday Night Football on NBC in Week 18. We'll see what happens there. But let's talk about the team who did win that game. Once again, the Buffalo Bills. I think this is actually their first time in the number one spot. I've had them pretty close up there. If this is not, it's probably going to be the second or third time that I've actually had them up high on this list. No, it is actually the second time I've had them up here, but the Lions have controlled the number one spot in the power rankings for a good majority of the season. I mean, the only other team that has come close was the Buffalo Bills. They really have been that team. It's been really back and forth between those two teams in terms of how many times they've been in the number one spot. But the Buffalo Bills, to go into Detroit after what happened last week in Los Angeles and just completely decimate whatever the Lions had left of them, just. It was a really good game. Like I said, it's probably a Super Bowl preview, depending on what happens with the Detroit Lions going forward. But really fun game overall. Probably the best game of the entire week, really, the Bills and the Lions. And like I said, could eventually be a Super Bowl preview if the Lions' defensive problems aren't going to be a huge factor going forward. But we'll see what happens. So there you go. That's the top five for this week. You can see the rest of the list here. The Cleveland Browns down all the way to the bottom. Jacksonville, New England, New York, Las Vegas, Chicago. Teams that, basically were down there for appropriate reasons because they are just not that good this year. But what about the teams that are good this year? And you hear that music in the background, ladies and gentlemen. That means, of course, it's time for another look at the Reviewing Network Path to the Playoffs. I don't even know what I was doing there, but I'm just figuring out stupid ways to open this segment up here. I think I even said that the wrong way. So the correct way to open that up is the NFL Network's Path to the Playoffs. There, I made it short and sweet for you. So enough said. Let's get to this extended edition of Path to the Playoffs because we have some things to talk about in both conferences. So let's just go ahead and jump right on into it. And so let us begin with a look at the AFC playoff picture, which got a little bit more clearer this past week because another division has been officially clinched. And let's go ahead and take a look at the list right here. As you see, Kansas City Chiefs still hanging in there at 13-1. I mean, this week was the first time in a long time they've scored more than one score to win a game. But even then, I mean, on paper they look pretty good, but of course, Patrick Mahomes got injured in the Cleveland game, but if you've seen the injury reports, chances are he's going to play this week and probably not even feel the effects of that high ankle sprain, but we'll see. But Kansas City at the number one spot, Buffalo in the 2 spot. They clinched the AFC East a couple weeks ago. They were at 11-3. Pittsburgh still clinched the playoff berth, even though they lost to Philadelphia, sitting at 10-4. The Houston Texans have clinched the AFC South. Not really much of a shocker there at 9-5. Then you got the wild cards, Baltimore, Denver, Los Angeles. So really nothing has changed in terms of the wild cards and the teams that were already set up in the top 7 spots. What has changed, of course, is that the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Tennessee Titans, they are no longer in contention for the postseason. So what I want to do today is to take a look at the teams that are essentially have not had their official positioning placed just yet. Let's start with the 3 seed, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Of course, they lost to Philadelphia on Sunday, and their schedule coming up is also pretty rough. I mean, you've got 2 games against teams that are in the playoffs right now. The Baltimore Ravens, of course, this Saturday, and then Kansas City on Christmas Day, which is 4 days after they play the Ravens. If you know the Steelers and Ravens, those games can be very, very straining on the players who play in them. I mean, this is going to be a very, very tough 4 days for both of these teams, all 4 of these teams that are playing this Saturday and also on Wednesday. And then, of course, you end the season against the Cincinnati Bengals. So really, the low point for the Steelers right now is to finish at 11-6. I think they could beat. I think they could be 1-3 when 1-3 of the next 3 games they have here. But I think that means they'll probably lose they'll lose the wild card. They'll get pushed down to the wild card while the Ravens take over. But yeah, this is going to be a very, very tough stretch for them, especially considering that, of course, George Pickens has been out for the last couple weeks. TJ Watt got injured in the loss to Philadelphia. But it looks like he's going to play on Saturday right now. We'll wait to see what happens there. But if TJ Watt isn't there, Steelers could be in danger of going one and done. Now the Baltimore Ravens, their schedule after is pretty much the same thing as the Steelers. Of course, they play them on Saturday, and then they play the Texans on Christmas Day. Texans really don't have anything else to play for the rest of the season. Nobody can get past them in their division. They can't really move up a couple of spots to the number 1 seed, so they're kind of stuck in the 4 seed right now. I mean, they could probably jump up to the 3 seed maybe, but right now they really don't have anything else to really play for all that much. I mean, after they play the Texans after they play the Kansas City Chiefs on Saturday and the Ravens on Christmas Day, they got the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee's going to end their season with a losing record. So their ceiling, I think their ceiling overall is that they'll probably finish somewhere at 11-6, maybe. Maybe they'll get a win out of either Kansas City or Baltimore. But I think Tennessee is an easy win for them. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I think their low point is the 9. The low point obviously is the 9-8, but I think they can finish somewhere between 11-6 or maybe even 10-7, depending on what happens in general. But we'll see what happens there. Let's go to the Denver Broncos. Now let's go to the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore Ravens, of course, they play the Steelers on Saturday, and then they play the Texans on Wednesday, and then they finish the season against the lowly Cleveland Browns, which they lost to earlier in the season, but that was when Jameis Winston was still the quarterback for the team. Their ceiling, I think, is somewhere between 11-7, maybe 10-7, depending on what happens. But I mean, this really is an interesting period for both the Steelers and the Ravens, because one of these teams obviously is going to win the division, but I don't know exactly how the tiebreaker scenario works here. If they both tied at 11-6, maybe I think Pittsburgh might have the advantage over the Baltimore Ravens, because the Ravens did lose 2 division games up to this point, and they would have one more after this. I think the Steelers have the upper hand in terms of the divisional records here. Let me see. Yeah, as of right now, the Steelers are 3-1 in the division. The Ravens are 2-2. So it could be very interesting to see how this one ends out in particular. So we'll definitely keep you up to date on that as the weeks go on. The Denver Broncos, like I said, have a chance to clinch their first playoff berth since they went to the Super Bowl in 2015. It's been that long. They've had so many different quarterbacks coming in there and coaches to try to bring back the magic, and the magic is definitely back this year. They are playing the Broncos, who started 0-2, did not look very strong overall, but once they beat Tampa Bay in Week 3, they've really started to turn the tide around, and the schedule overall actually doesn't look that bad in particular. They've got the Thursday night game tomorrow against the Los Angeles Chargers, and then in Los Angeles, and of course the Chargers beat them the first time around when they were in Denver, and then they go to Cincinnati on Saturday. Yeah, Saturday. They just announced that yesterday as one of the Saturday games, and then they have the Kansas City Chiefs, who will probably be resting their players during that because they'll pretty much have everything they need locked up. So probably they could finish maybe around 10-6, 10-7 maybe. By the way, that should probably help them get into the playoffs overall when it's all said and done. Now, in terms of the Los Angeles Chargers, their schedule overall doesn't look that bad either. It's actually pretty favorable for them. They just got to get past the Denver Broncos. We got to see what happens if they can sweep the Denver Broncos tomorrow, and then after that they play the New England Patriots in New England. New England hasn't been that great overall this season, and then they get an easy game to end the season with the Las Vegas Raiders, who the Raiders, if you saw on Monday night, they are not that good of a football team. But I mean, on paper, the Chargers look like they have the advantage here, but of course, the Denver Broncos, I think, it's going to be very interesting to see how this ends out. I think they could probably finish the season at 10-7 as well, and I think that again, I don't know how much. Let me see the division standings here. Right now, they're both sitting at 2-2. So this game tomorrow is extremely important for both teams because it essentially gives the winner the advantage to move into either the 7th or 6th spot here in the playoffs. So if Denver wins and gets the playoff spot, I think they have the upper hand of being the one ahead of the Los Angeles Chargers. It could be the other way around, though, if the Chargers do end up winning tomorrow. And in terms of in the hunt teams right now, you've only got 3 still remaining in there. The Indianapolis Colts, the Miami Dolphins, the Cincinnati Bengals. And of the 3, I think the Cincinnati Bengals have the upper hand on the Colts and the Dolphins. Their schedule after this is not the hardest one. I mean, they play the Cleveland Browns this week. Then they play Denver on Saturday, and then they play the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh on the last week of the regular season. And depending on what happens tomorrow is on Saturday with the Steelers, they still got an opportunity. The Bengals still have an opportunity to make a run here. I think they'll end the season on a winning record at 9-8, and they have a chance to possibly sneak in there if the Chargers somehow crater out at the end of the season. I think they stand the best chance of possibly making it in as a wild card team. I think it's going to be a really tough stretch to actually get it to happen. But if I had to pick between the Bengals, the Dolphins, and the Colts, the Bengals I think have the upper hand over the Dolphins and Colts. Dolphins I think waited way too long to get Tua back in there, to find a replacement for Tua Tagovailoa to really compete. And they probably will play well for the rest of the season, but they're going to suffer big time by that big stretch when he wasn't there. And the Colts, just kind of a mixed bag right now. They had a chance to beat Denver on Sunday, and then they basically just gave the game away with two really bad plays back to back. And yeah, it's going to be tough for them to really compete in the playoff picture right now, especially with the AFC South now officially clinched. So that is the AFC look at everything going on right now. Let's go ahead and move over to the NFC next. Over in the NFC, there's still a lot to sort out here, which could essentially be decided this week with the games coming up here. But right now, the Detroit Lions still hanging on to the 1 seed at 12-2, even though they lost to the Buffalo Bills. Philadelphia has won 10 straight. They're coming for the Lions right now. There was a big change in the AFC South picture with Tampa Bay moving up to the 3 seed at 8-6. And of course, with Seattle's loss to Green Bay on Sunday, the Los Angeles Rams took over the 4 seed. Minnesota's the only other team that's clinched a playoff berth as the wild card right now, but they still have a chance at the division. Green Bay, as I said, winning in this week against the New Orleans Saints. Washington Commanders sitting there at 9-5. So let's just go ahead and take a look at some of the games coming up here. The Lions have a pretty easy schedule going forward here, because after they play the Bears on Sunday, they play a very not like last season 49ers team in that NFC Championship rematch. A game I think they should easily win. But then it all comes down to that last game of the season against the Minnesota Vikings. And if Minnesota keeps this up here, that's going to be the Sunday Night Football game that wraps up the regular season. And all bets are off on who wins that one here. If the Lions' injuries on defense are as bad as they really end up becoming, I mean that's going to make these next couple weeks very, very critical for the Detroit Lions. Now the Philadelphia Eagles, they have a pretty easy schedule going forward as well. I mean, their biggest test coming up is this week at Washington, and of course Washington almost beat them the last time they played. If it wasn't for one significant play, that fourth down play in that game on Thursday night this last month. And you never can tell with these divisional games. And they've got 3 straight divisional games coming up here at Washington. Then they host Dallas and New York going forward, and that's going to be a very, very interesting stretch run there, especially considering how crazy some of these divisional games have been so far this season. I mean, all bets are off on what could happen at the end of the year, but I think if they somehow get past Washington, I think they'll be. I think they should be good to go to 15-2 and possibly take over the 1 seed, especially considering what's going on with the Lions. But we'll wait to see what happens. But I think the Eagles have a good chance here to possibly go to 15-2, at the very least 14-3. Tampa Bay sitting at 8-6. Of course, the Atlanta Falcons are not too far behind them. They're the only team in that division that essentially can find a way to beat them. But the Buccaneers' schedule is very easy too. They got the Dallas Cowboys Sunday night. Then they got Carolina and they got New Orleans. So I think they could be 11-6 and win the division here. I think they really have a better opportunity to clinch the division than the Atlanta Falcons do. The NFC West is another one that could be really, really different when the season comes to an end. I mean, the Rams, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals all have a chance to potentially clinch that division. I think it's too late for the 49ers. Looking at the schedules for all 3 teams, the Rams have the New York Jets this week in New York, and then the 2 critical divisional matchups, Arizona first and then Seattle. So, it definitely is going to be very, very interesting to see how that plays out for the Rams. I think they're getting hot at the right time, so it might help them in the long run. Excuse me. Now, in terms of Minnesota, their schedule has of course, they have the Seattle. They go to Seattle next week, this week, and then they host Green Bay next week, and then at Detroit. And Green Bay, if they can follow up what they did against Seattle last week, that's going to be another one of those games that could be very, very interesting in terms of how the playoff picture looks by the time the start of the new year comes. Now, for the Green Bay Packers, their schedule starts off pretty easy. They host New Orleans, and then at Minnesota, and then they have Chicago. So they could probably finish somewhere around 12-5 if they're really lucky. I don't think they're going to get the division, but it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. If everybody finishes within 12-5 or something like 12-5 or 13-4, but really, really interesting to see how that will play out there. Washington, their schedule. Let's see. Their schedule is probably the toughest of the ones I mentioned. Philadelphia, Atlanta, and then at Dallas. At Dallas, I think is a win for them, but then Philadelphia, Atlanta, it definitely can go either way. They could I feel like they could finish somewhere between 10-7 or 11-6 if they get really lucky. But again, we'll have to wait to see what happens, and I'll delve more into that in just a little bit. Now, in terms of the teams in the hunt, we've got Seattle, Atlanta, Arizona, San Francisco, Dallas, and New Orleans. I think Dallas and New Orleans get eliminated this week. San Francisco, I think, will get eliminated eventually. I think it'll eventually come down to Arizona, Atlanta, and Seattle in Week 18. I think Arizona still has a chance, but they really have to play consistently good football. If they can play as well as they did against New England last week, I think they've got a good chance to sneak in there as the NFC West winner. Seattle, without Geno Smith, we saw what happened, but I mean, we don't know how long term of an injury it is. Probably not that much long term, but I mean, I just don't feel really good about Seattle right now. Nor do I really feel good about Atlanta, although they are finally benching Kirk Cousins for Michael Penix Jr. So we'll wait to see what happens there. If Michael Penix Jr. can somehow find a way to win these next 3 games and get Atlanta into the playoffs, I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that pans out there. So, bottom line is, we've got a long way to go before we get to the critical week 18. But buckle up, folks. To paraphrase Samuel L. Jackson in Jurassic Park, hold on to your butts. So with all that said, I've talked about what the path to the playoffs looks like. What about my predictions? So let's go ahead and just jump on into it, because I know that's what everyone here has been waiting for. So let's go to the predictions. And taking a look at my predictions from last week, I actually did pretty good. I got 10 out of 16, which is much better than I had the last couple of weeks. So I'm back in business here. So let's see how week 16 looks. And I think I've got a pretty good idea of where things might go here. But then again, what do I know? I'm usually very wrong with my predictions, as we've seen over the last couple of months. So let's go ahead and see if I can get something right here for a change. So let's go ahead and just jump into the Thursday night game. The critical Thursday night game between the Denver Broncos and the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers had that loss against Tampa Bay where they looked pretty good at first, and then just Tampa Bay just threw an avalanche right at them, and they just put up 40 points on the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers really have not been the same since J.K. Dobbins got knocked out of the game. That running game was working strong for them in the first half of the season, and then as soon as J.K. Dobbins went out, that's when it all came cratering down. And unfortunately, Chargers, I'll say this, they've definitely looked a lot better than they've had, I think anybody really expected them to do in their first year, but this is going to be a very tough one here for them to have the Denver Broncos coming into town, because like I said, Denver won a close game against Indianapolis. Really was basically the Colts handing them the game, but the Broncos have really improved since the way the season began. And if I'm looking at the two teams who are going in the direction that who should win this game, I got to go with the hot hand of the Denver Broncos. I think they are going to be motivated to buck that trend that they've had for the last 8 years, not making it to the playoffs, not having a quarterback to replace Peyton Manning for the longest time. They've had so many opportunities. Bo Nix, I think, really is the guy going forward. I don't think he's playing his best football right now, but if he can keep up this pace that if he keeps up the pace that he's had for the most of the season, I think he can lead them to the playoffs, and it'll lead to bigger and better things going forward into the future. I think he can finally give Patrick Mahomes a real competitor in that division. And, I think the Broncos are really going to find a way to get into the playoffs. They probably will not do much there, but stranger things have happened. But I'm going to go with the Denver Broncos to finally get back to the playoffs. I think they win this game. I think they win their chance to go to the playoffs as a wild card team. I'm taking the Broncos to go to 10-5 and the Chargers to drop to 8-7. And next up on the list, we've got the NFL Holiday Special. 2 games on Saturday featuring the 4 teams that will play the opposing teams on Christmas Day, starting with the Houston Texans and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Texans have won the AFC South, beating Miami in a pretty good game overall, probably their best game in a long, long time. Kansas City scored more than one score in a game, which is very rare for them, and of course, the big story is, of course, Patrick Mahomes. You know, he had that high ankle sprain. Will he be able to go on Saturday? Well, considering that he has been a full participant in practice on Tuesday and Wednesday, and because God hates us all, I'm willing to bet that Patrick Mahomes is going to play, and he's not going to miss any games the rest of the season until the Chiefs have locked up everything. So, yeah. I mean, this should be a competitive game, especially considering that this could possibly be a playoff preview for both of these teams. But when you really look at it, the Chiefs have more to play for than the Houston Texans. Like I said in the path of the playoffs, the Texans really do not have much more to gain in terms of playoff positioning. I mean, they could probably move up to 3 if they win more games than the Steelers do. I don't think they're going to get to the 2 seed. They're certainly not going to get the 1 seed. I think they're very much out of that contention. But Texans really have nothing else to play for the rest of the season. In fact, I would not be shocked at all if in the last 2 games of the after the Christmas Day game, they rest their starters because they know they got to play the wild card game after that. But yeah, just because of that, I got to go with the home team in the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, even if Patrick Mahomes has this high ankle sprain, I really don't think it's going to be enough to really slow them down. They're still going to find ways to win games. I still am the belief that they are the worst 13-1 team, and they're going to be the worst 14-1 team because I'm going to pick them to win this one. I'm going to give them the win. I'm going to give the Chiefs the 14-1 record, and the Texans drop to 9-6. Like I said, Texans really don't have not much else to play for in terms of playoff positioning, but Chiefs are trying to get the number 1 seed, and they could do so with a win and a Buffalo Bills loss this week. And then we get to a big AFC North divisional showdown between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. Steelers, of course, have now gone 60 years without a win in Philadelphia, and just all those stories that the Philadelphia Eagles were talking about beforehand. Let's just be honest; they were all just BS. Because you saw what happened. I mean, Jalen Hurts was able to find A.J. Brown. There was no story there. I mean, everyone thought this was going to be the next, Donovan McNabb, Terrell Owens type of thing. I was saying that too, but of course that turned out to be a lie. And look at how well the Eagles did. I mean, they won the game against the Steelers, taking 10 minutes off the clock in the fourth quarter without even having Saquon Barkley doing all that much. Saquon Barkley was not a factor in that game. Just think about that. And then, of course, the Steelers, like I said, T.J. Watt not getting injured in that game. Luckily, the good news is that it looks like it's not going to be a major injury that's going to keep him out, but there's still a possibility he could be out against the Ravens, which I think if that happens, it just gives the Ravens more than enough opportunities to win that game because the Steelers have not done very well when T.J. Watt is not in the lineup. And on top of that, you don't have George Pickens. You're not throwing the ball to Mike Williams enough. The running game that's supposed to be the bread and butter for this team can't stop fumbling the effing football. So yeah, it's just not looking good right now. Now, to Pittsburgh's credit, they have 2 things going for them in this game. 3 of them, actually. 1, they win this game, they win the AFC North. Obviously, that's the biggest given. 2, this is only the 2nd time that Lamar Jackson has ever played the Steelers in Baltimore. Of course, the last time they did it was 2020. It was the COVID year. It was also the year the Steelers went undefeated for the first 11 weeks of the season. And 3, Steelers have been very good against Lamar Jackson and pretty much very good against the Baltimore Ravens. So they beat him before. They could probably do it again. However, I just have that terrible feeling in my stomach that, T.J. Watt's probably not going to be there. That's going to be major for them going into this game. And the Ravens, I think, are going to rely more on Derrick Henry in this particular matchup here. So, as much as I want to put my Steelers in the win column in this one, I just can't do it, man. I just got that terrible feeling that what I think is going to happen here. I think Baltimore is not going to let the Steelers take the AFC North right away. I think they're going to win this game here to go to 10-5. The Steelers drop to 10-5, and I just got that terrible feeling that the Steelers are just going to lose out the rest of the way. Like, with Cincinnati still doing whatever it can to hold on and maybe sneak into the playoffs, and Kansas City being Kansas City, I don't really like the way things are going from this point. I think the Steelers are going to end the season at 10-7. It's just they're going to have to go on the road, probably play a wild card game, and probably be one and done like they usually do. But hey, it's okay. Mike Tomlin got that non-losing season record, so he's good to go. I hope I'm wrong. This is every time I pick against the Steelers, I'm always hoping I'm wrong. It's like, here, I picked you to lose. Now prove me wrong. And then the last couple times I've done it, they actually have proven me wrong. But then again, last week they couldn't win against Philadelphia. So I'm going with the Ravens to win this one. I hate saying that, but I just think the Ravens are going to find a way to eke out a win in this one. These games will always be tough. It's a rivalry game, one of the toughest rivalry games ever. These teams will be beaten and bruised before they play the Chiefs and the Texans on Christmas Day. So buckle up, folks. It's going to be a rough 4 days for all 4 of those teams playing on Saturday. As we now move into the Sunday games, let's start off with the Cleveland Browns hosting the Cincinnati Bengals. Actually, it's the other way around. The Cleveland Browns in Cincinnati as the Bengals are hosting the Browns. I got that confused there. But as I said before, the Cincinnati Bengals still holding on to that thin layer of hope that they can sneak into the playoffs. And they've been playing really good football the last couple of weeks. They have been pretty much playing good football offensively all season long. It's the defense that has really been struggling for them at this point. And yeah, it's really hard to see whether or not that this season could be very much a disappointment, because the defense has clearly lost a lot of its muster. It's amazing that, Brian Callahan, the longtime offensive coordinator, goes to Tennessee, and yet the Bengals offense is the one that's been really powering through, and that Lou Amarillo's defense, which everyone thought that Lou Amarillo was going to be a head coach in the NFL a couple of years ago, there's a good chance he probably is not, especially after this season. But I mean, we'll wait to see what happens. Stranger things have happened, but they go against the Cleveland Browns, who have been struggling, of course. They've been struggling all season long, and they're just waiting for the season to be over with, especially now with Nick Chubb now again out for the season after returning a couple weeks ago. And then Jameis Winston was benched last week for Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who's going to be starting this week for the Bengals, against the Bengals. And it's just not looking good for the Browns overall. They just want the season to be over with. I will say this, though. The Cleveland Browns always somehow play better against Cincinnati. They've beaten them in Cincinnati the last couple of years. That could happen again here, but just because the Bengals are in desperation mode to stick around for the playoff push, I'm going to go with Cincinnati. I think they've been on a roll the last couple of weeks. I think that's going to continue this week here, although I will not be shocked at all if the Cleveland Browns do pull an upset here. But then again, I wanted them to pull the upset against the Chiefs last week, and of course that didn't happen. So what the hell do I know? So give me the Bengals to go to 7-8 and the Browns to drop to 3-12. Which brings us to the New York Giants versus the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons won on Monday night, but that was not a win they should have been proud of. I mean, Kirk Cousins, hey, he threw a touchdown, but he still threw interceptions. I mean, the Falcons have not looked good for the second half of the season. It's largely been because of Kirk Cousins and just how much of an overrated quarterback he really is, and the fact that they've had so many opportunities to bring in Michael Penix Jr. to see what he can do in the situation here. They could have easily put him in that game against the Raiders last week, and Raiders almost pulled off the upset win in the last couple of minutes, but of course, it was not meant to be for the Raiders. We'll get to them in just a little bit, but the Giants, they're just waiting for the season to be over with. They're thinking about how they're going to destroy the career of Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, because let's be honest, they're going to do just that to the next quarterback that comes into the Giants organization. Giants have had some brief flashes of problems with Tyrone Tracy and Malik Neighbors, but everything else has just been falling apart. The defense, that was the only bright spot, has been injured and battered to death. They got destroyed by the Ravens last week. And like I said, for the Falcons, they're starting Michael Penix Jr. for the first time this season. So we're going to finally get to see if Michael Penix Jr. can pull off this miracle playoff run. And it starts off pretty favorably with them, with a bad New York Giants team. And I think we'll get to see if the guy is truly worth the price that they had here. And it's going to lead to some very interesting conversations if the Falcons should stick with Kirk Cousins after the season, or if Michael Penix Jr. is just not ready yet. He's got 3 games to prove himself, so we'll see what happens. But I think he's going to get an easy win in this one. I think either one. really doesn't really matter who's the quarterback in this one, Cousins or Penix Jr. The Falcons are going to win this one regardless. I just don't see any reason why the Giants would want to F up their own tank, who, I mean, they're sitting right now at the number one draft pick in the draft right now, and why would you want to risk that? I mean, why would you want to risk that in general? What to say that, hey, well, we don't want to lose games. We want to win. Do you want a quarterback for the future, or do you want another Daniel Jones? Like, you guys don't even know I don't even know who the quarterback's going to be in this game for the New York Giants, because Drew Lock's out. Daniel Jones is now in Minnesota, where he's going to make a playoff push. Tommy DeVito is injured. I don't even know. I can't even remember who came in for the Ravens at the end of the game last week. But regardless, the Falcons, I think, will win this one easily. I don't think it's going to be even close. Give me the Falcons to go to 8-7, the Giants to drop to 2-13. Which brings us to the Detroit Lions and the Chicago Bears, the rematch of the controversial Thanksgiving finish, where the Chicago Bears had a chance to tie the game, but Matt Eberflus has no idea of the concept of timeouts, and basically just let the clock run out, and they didn't even get a playoff before they had an opportunity to kick the field goal. He defended it, and then the Bears said, yeah, you gotta go. Ever since then, they have not won a single game. In fact, they haven't won a single game since they were 4-2 against the Commanders. And could have won that game if it wasn't for Jaden Daniels' long-ass arm and, of course, the Hail Mary play that gave the Commanders the win. They have not won a game since then. They were 4-2 before that play happened. And then it was all downhill from there. They've lost 9 straight. They got embarrassed on Monday against the Minnesota Vikings. They did not even bother to show up. And they're playing the Lions, who, as I've said, are bruised and battered on the defensive front. 16 critical players on their defense are on IR. They lost David Montgomery for the season. They've lost a huge part of their running game. So now it's going to be Jahmyr Gibbs going forward. And, yeah, Jared Goff can still play pretty good. But if these injuries keep piling up, Minnesota's going to be creeping up right behind them. But nevertheless, I think Detroit does win this game. I think Detroit still goes in there and wins this one, specifically just because the Chicago Bears are just completely dismantled right now. And quite frankly, they really don't have a future going for them. Yeah, you can look ahead to next season, but the one person who probably could have turned this team around, Bill Belichick, has decided, you know what, I'm going to go to North Carolina and go coach college football. Who are the Bears going to go and get to rebuild this roster around? I mean, the only person I can think of is getting a dump trunk full of money to the Lions organization and saying, give us the rights to sign Ben Johnson. Even then, I don't think that's going to be enough for them. But I am going to pick the Lions to win this one, to go to 13-2, and the Bears to drop to 4-11. So moving on to the next one, we have the Tennessee Titans hosting the Indianapolis Colts, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check here just to make sure, because as you can tell, I've been wrong a couple times so far today. And I was wrong on this one. The Tennessee Titans go to Indianapolis to play the Colts. The Colts, yeah, basically gave the Broncos the win in that game last week with 2 critical mistakes on their part. Helped the Pittsburgh Steelers get to the playoffs. Tennessee, just like the Bears, the Giants, just waiting for the season to be over with. And yeah, the Titans really do not have anything left for them this season. There is a lot of things that they need to think about, including the quarterback. Who is the guy going to be to really save the season for the Detroit line, for the Tennessee Titans? I mean, it can't be Will Levis. I mean, the guy was pretty much they were already setting him up to be the next big thing. I mean, for God's sakes, he was in commercials for Duke's mayonnaise because, he eats mayonnaise all the time, and you can't do that if the guy hasn't won anything. Like, it's like with Baker Mayfield before he went to Tampa Bay. It's just like, what did Stephen A. Smith used to say about Baker Mayfield? More commercials than wins. So who do they turn to here? Who else do they go to going forward here? And wait a minute, I think I hear something. I think I hear something here. Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer. Uh-oh, you hear that? Had a very shiny nose. Just like he did last year, Rudolph is coming to save Christmas. That's right, Mason Rudolph has been named the official starter for the Tennessee Titans. And just like last year for Pittsburgh, he comes in there, he wins 3 straight, he gets the Steelers into the playoffs. He's going to help the Tennessee Titans probably improve their draft record, maybe, but I mean, like I said, he's not really going to do a whole lot in general, but he at least is going to get that opportunity to start for the Tennessee Titans, which, when he's been in there, the Titans have looked a lot better than they did with Will Levis. Will Levis and Anthony Richardson are kind of in that same position where it's just like they've shown brief flashes of promise, but there's really nothing there that really suggests that they're going to be the great players that we expect them to be. And the Colts, I feel like, are going to have a massive rebuilding as well. I mean, I would not be shocked. Not be a shock if Jonathan Taylor's playing for somebody else next year, because they're really just wasting that guy's talents on that football team right now. I mean, even he is wasting his own talents on that team, especially after last week. But nevertheless, I'm going with the Colts to win this one. I think the Colts just have the better opportunity. And they're going to try come hell or high water to keep in the playoff hunt, but it's just really, like I said, it's not really going to do that much, but hey, they're going to try. I think they have a better chance of winning this one than the Titans do. Give me the Colts to win this one, to go to 7-8, the Titans to drop to 3-12. Following that, we've got the Los Angeles Rams heading out to the Meadowlands to face the New York Jets. The Jets, they got a win last week against Jacksonville in probably one of the more impressive games that I wouldn't have expected. I mean, honestly, when I looked at that game, I thought that I could have gone the tie route with that one, but because both the Jets and the Jaguars have not been that great, and I picked the Jaguars over the Jets. I thought the Jaguars were going to use the home field advantage to their advantage, and they did for a little bit, but then Aaron Rodgers returned to vintage form, and the Jets are going to find a way to. The Jets are really going to find a way to end the season on a high note, aren't they? With Aaron Rodgers probably out of the organization. This is this big closing. This is this big climax in the Broadway production that is Aaron Rodgers presents the New York Jets, starring Aaron Rodgers. But here's the thing: they're going up against the Los Angeles Rams team, who is getting red hot at the right time. They didn't have the best win last week against the 49ers. It was one of the most ugly Thursday night football games in a season where most of the Thursday night football games have actually been pretty good, but not this one. No touchdowns, all field goals. Rams got lucky with the last field goal to win the game, and they are in a good position right now, but they need to start scoring some touchdowns pretty fast. And going up against the Jets team that eked out a win against Jacksonville, I think it'll benefit them in the long run. I think they're easily going to win this one, since they're still very much in the playoff hunt. So give me the Rams to go to 9-6, and the Jets to drop to 4-11. And following that, you've got the Washington Commanders hosting the Philadelphia Eagles. Last time these two teams met in November, the Eagles got a win in a game that was pretty close in the beginning of the fourth quarter, but then Jaden Daniels makes a critical mistake on fourth down, and then the Eagles just took it over from that point forward. Had no chance for the Commanders to come back in that one, and Commanders eked out a win against New Orleans. New Orleans really came in there and could have spoiled the whole party for them, but of course they missed the 2-point conversion. The Commanders walk out of there at 9-5, their first winning record in a long, long time. Philadelphia, of course, knocked out the Steelers again. I don't think I really need to explain what happened there. I already mentioned it before, but Eagles have been red hot 10 straight, but I feel like the Washington Commanders, like I said, they are the biggest competitor for the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC East right now. NFC East. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens here. I think a lot of people have Philadelphia winning this one here and essentially clinching the division, but I'm going to go ahead and give the Washington Commanders a chance here. I think Washington wants to make amends for how the game ended last time around. Divisional games can really, as I've said before, time and time again, they can be rather different to really predict overall. So I'm going to go ahead and give the Commanders the win here. I think Washington is hell-bent on, proving to the Philadelphia Eagles that we can match up against you very well. And I hope hopefully they will get to do that here. So I'm going to go ahead and give the Commanders the win here. I think it's going to be a very close game. I think the Commanders and the Eagles will take it down to the wire here. It might come down to a field goal by one of the two teams to win it. So I'll take the Commanders to win this one, to go to 10-5, Eagles to drop to 12-3. Following that, we've got the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers. Carolina, if you can't even beat a bad Dallas Cowboys team, then there's no hope. There's no humanity left for you guys. You had a great month going there, keeping it close and gutsy performances, but could never eke out a win. I think the Panthers are heading in the right direction than they did at the start of the season. I think they are starting to trust Bryce Young more and more. Hopefully that's a sign of things going forward for him. But of course, last week against the Cowboys, a really bad Cowboys team that probably should not have won that game, but they have some stars in the Cowboys, and the Panthers just really don't have that much there. I think they just lost that spark after having so many close games when they could have easily won those games against Kansas City and Tampa Bay, and they just haven't had the chance to do so. The Cardinals are a team that I've said before, they're a very mixed bag this season, but believe it or not, they still have more than an opportunity to go into the end of the season and probably still be in contention for the division. I mean, they've shown me flashes of promise. It's just all about consistency. Can they keep the same kind of motivation that they had against the New England Patriots? Can they run James Conner more? Can they get Marvin Harrison Jr. more involved? Can they get Trey McBride more involved? I mean, there's a lot of things that need to go right for the Cardinals, I think, to really pull out an opportunity to be right up there with the Rams and the Seahawks to win this division. I think this week they have an easy win against the Carolina Panthers. I think they're going to win this one easily. Where they go from there, who knows? Because they've got two critical divisional matchups coming up against the Seahawks and the Rams. Both teams they have beaten those teams so far, but we'll wait to see what happens here. So give me the Cardinals to go to 8-7 and the Panthers to drop to 3-12. Next up, we have the Minnesota Vikings versus the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks, once Geno Smith was out of the picture, it was pretty much game over. I mean, we all saw what happened. We all saw what happened as soon as Geno Smith got taken out. That Seahawks team that looks promising just completely fell apart when Sam Howell took over. And who knows if Geno Smith's going to play this week, although he did practice fully today. So there's an opportunity that he will be able to go this Sunday. And they're going to have to go against the Minnesota Vikings team that is just continuing to find ways to win games. This week was not their best win overall, but then again, it was against the Chicago Bears team, who was basically just giving up on life as a whole and was giving them easy opportunities to score touchdowns. But this is the type of game where I think Seattle pulls off an upset, but I just can't do that because every time I pick the Minnesota Vikings to lose, they win. So, Minnesota, another fluky playoff run is going to continue for you. Since you're already in the playoffs, who knows, they might even get the 1 seed at this point. I mean, I've said for years that these playoff runs they've had, they've all seemed like flukes, and I feel like this one is going to be too. But except this time, this is the best record they've had probably since 1998, that 15-1 season they had. So I'm going to go ahead and give the Vikings the win in this one. Give me the Vikings to go to 13-2 and the Seahawks to drop to 8-7. And next up, we have a matchup that probably would have been interesting a couple years ago, but not so much. I don't even know why they moved this game to the late afternoon window. We've got the New England Patriots going to Buffalo to play the Bills. The Bills had that dominant win over the Detroit Lions last week. New England got completely shredded by Arizona. I've said it before, Drake May is the future for the team. Everything else is still a question mark. Can they build a team around Drake May going forward? Is Gerard Mayo the real successor to Bill Belichick? Are they going to be able to find somebody to take his place if they want to get rid of him? I really don't know. I don't really know for certain if that's going to be the case here, but I think the Patriots will build around Drake May in the offseason. But in terms of this game here, Bills are still very much in contention for the number 1 seed, and I think if they win out, they actually have the upper hand over Kansas City if they start losing some games here, especially with Patrick Mahomes with that high ankle sprain. How is that really going to affect his play going forward? I think the Bills are going to keep winning until they realize that there's nothing really much more they can do about it. So give me the Bills to go to the 12-3 in this one. Patriots are dropping 3-12. Not really much of a surprise in this one. And this one here is not really much of a surprise considering how bad both of these teams are. We've got the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Las Vegas Raiders. We've talked about what has happened with both of these teams. Jaguars got screwed over it's not really screwed over. They lost to the Jets on Aaron Rodgers returning to vintage form. And the Raiders, what has really gone right for them except for Brock Bowers this year? There's really nothing you can say about this game in particular. Both of these teams are terrible. Both of these teams are going to be definitely looking different than they will these last couple weeks. They're going to probably look for new coaches, especially the Jaguars in particular. I mean, this is going to be a game that's going to be uncomfortable to watch. I feel sorry for anybody in Jacksonville or Las Vegas who's going to have this game as their main game for the late afternoon window. It's just not looking like a good game whatsoever. And this is where I'm going to cheat a little bit here and bring my tie into play here. I really don't know who's going to win this one here. I mean, the Jaguars, I think, have the upper hand, but the Raiders, this is the type of game they probably sneak out a win here by field goals. It's going to be an ugly game going forward. So I'm just going with my tiebreaker here. Whoever wins, I'm putting the point in my predictions here. So I'm going to say this one's going to be a tie. I don't know who to pick in this one, Jaguars or Raiders. I think it's going to be a tie. Next up, you've got a matchup between the Miami Dolphins and the San Francisco 49ers. 40 years ago, these two teams were fighting for a Super Bowl. Of course, back then they had Dan Marino and Joe Montana as the quarterbacks, and a much radically different team than they are nowadays. And the Dolphins are hosting the 49ers, I should say, and the 49ers, as I said before, really have had the worst luck in the world. They did not score a single touchdown last week. They keep getting banged up. They're losing critical players, and you can only do so much before it's time to admit that this team is just not as good as they were last year. And of course, the Devondre Campbell controversy really hurt them in the long run last week. Miami, like I said before, man, like they're trying for a playoff push, but I'm sorry, that time when Tua wasn't there, you should have thought of a backup plan instead of just going for the most minimal quarterback that can not do a whole lot there. Like after the second week without Tua, you should have known that Snoop Huntley was not your answer. Now Tyreek Hill wants to get out of Miami. All hell's breaking loose right now for the Dolphins, but they're gonna hope to get in the playoffs somehow. I think they have the upper hand in this one here, but I don't think it's going to be enough to really give them a playoff push at the end here. I mean, they're going to push for it, but I don't think they have much of a chance. Unless Indianapolis and Cincinnati just collapse going forward, as well as the Chargers, I just don't see it happening here. So I am going to give them the win in this one. I think they stack up better than the 49ers, so I'm going to give the Dolphins the win in this one to go to 7-8, 49ers to drop to 6-9. Next up, we have the Sunday Night Football matchup, Tampa Bay versus Dallas. Dallas got a win against Carolina last week. They played decently in some spots. CeeDee Lamb has been getting better the last couple weeks. Rico Dowdle has become a top running back for them. I don't think this... bottom line, the Cowboys really are not that great this year, but they're playing enough where, Jerry Jones can see that as telling Mike McCarthy, you've got job security for next year. Why? This is the same guy that said he was going all in, and all he did last year was completely do nothing and then be shocked when his team was sitting at 6-9 instead of fighting for a playoff spot. But like I said, Tampa Bay is riding the hot hand. Mike Evans has been playing really good, hoping to get another 1,000-yard season, which he might do, considering how well he's played the last couple of weeks. Baker Mayfield has been a godsend for the Buccaneers, and with the playoffs on the line, I think this is actually... I don't know if is this a win-and-in situation for them. I don't think it is, but no, it's not. Okay, I thought maybe it was. I'm looking at the clinching scenarios here, which I did not mention in my path to the playoffs, but I will do that after this. So stick around for that. But Buccaneers have the upper hand here. They've got the top spot of the division. They don't want to give it up, especially considering how Atlanta just kind of gave it to them. So I'm going to say the Buccaneers win this one. I don't think it's going to be really that hard to see why, because of how the Cowboys have not been that great, especially at home. Give me the Bucs to go to 9-6 and the Cowboys to drop to 6-9. And last but not least, we've got the Monday Night Football matchup between the New Orleans Saints and the Green Bay Packers. The Saints almost pulled an upset against Washington, but then again, what do they really have left? I mean, hey, don't get me wrong. I mean, they signed Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was cut by the Chiefs, so there's that, I guess, to push them into that playoff push that is clearly not going to happen at this point. But they don't have a quarterback. Their defense is pretty banged up. Their offense is pretty banged up. It's just the Saints fans are probably just waiting for the season to be over with. And really, I really don't see where the Saints could go going forward next season. But the Packers right now are red hot. This really is not a shocker who I'm going to pick for this one. The Packers coming off of that massive win against Seattle, just completely shredding whatever was left of the Seahawks' hopes and dreams. I mean, they should do the same here against the Saints. They've been playing really good football. They've been playing really well. Yeah, I think Packers are going to win this one, especially considering that this is a win-and-in game for them. They win this game, they're in the playoffs, so I think they do just that. Packers go to 10-4, Saints drop to 5-10. So just to recap on my Week 16 predictions, the Broncos over the Chargers, the Chiefs over the Texans, the Ravens over the Steelers, the Bengals over the Browns, the Falcons over the Giants, the Lions over the Bears, the Colts over the Titans, the Rams over the Jets, the Commanders over the Eagles, the Cardinals over the Panthers, the Vikings over the Seahawks, the Bills over the Patriots, a tie with the Jaguars and Raiders, Dolphins over the 49ers, Buccaneers over Cowboys, Packers over the Saints. So like I said before, there was clinching scenarios in the eliminations I did not mention here, so I'll just run through these pretty quickly. In the NFC, Philadelphia simply wins the game. They clinch the NFC East Division title. Washington can clinch a playoff berth with a win, an Atlanta loss, or a Seattle loss, or a Washington win, Atlanta loss, or a Los Angeles Rams loss. Excuse me. They can clinch with a tie, an Atlanta loss, an Arizona loss, a Seattle loss, or a Rams loss or tie. Or Washington tie, Atlanta loss, Arizona loss and tie, Seattle tie, Los Angeles Rams loss. Green Bay, win and you're in. Win the game on Monday night, you're in the playoffs. Or you could clinch it if Seattle loses and Atlanta loses, or if the Rams lose or the Falcons lose. Kansas City can clinch everything, the first round bye, the home field advantage, the 1 seed, if they win and Buffalo loses, or they can tie or Buffalo loses. Pittsburgh has only one way to get the AFC North Division title, and that's with a win. Denver clinches tomorrow night if they beat the Chargers. They can also hope for Cincinnati to lose, Indianapolis to lose, and Miami to lose. Chargers can clinch a playoff berth with a Chargers win, Indianapolis loss or tie, Miami loss or tie, or tie, Indianapolis loss, Miami loss, or Cincinnati loss. Baltimore is winning you're in. If they beat the Steelers, they're in the playoffs. They still are in contention for the AFC North. Or if Miami loses and Indianapolis loses, that's when they clinch the playoffs. Now, in the NFC, New Orleans is eliminated from NFC South title contention and playoff contention with a loss, a Tampa Bay win, or an Atlanta win. So it's basically going to be all for naught on Monday night if Tampa Bay or Atlanta wins, which, considering I have both of them predicted to do that, New Orleans probably gets eliminated before the halfway point of Sunday afternoon. Dallas is eliminated from playoff contention with a Washington win or Dallas loss. Arizona is knocked out of NFC West title contention with a loss or a Rams win, a loss or a Rams tie or a Seattle win or tie, a tie, a Los Angeles Rams win, or a Seattle win. And Arizona would be eliminated from playoff contention if they lose and the Rams win. Or if Arizona loses, Los Angeles ties, Seattle wins or ties, Arizona ties, Los Angeles Rams wins, Seahawks win, or Washington wins and ties. San Francisco is knocked out of the NFC West title contention with a loss, a Rams win, a Seahawks win, or an Arizona win. And the San Francisco will be eliminated from the playoffs if they lose, or if Seattle wins and Los Angeles wins, Seattle wins, Los Angeles ties, or Arizona wins, Seattle wins or ties, Washington wins or ties, Los Angeles wins or ties, Washington wins or ties, Arizona wins, Washington wins or ties. Or if Seattle wins or ties, Atlanta wins and Tampa Bay wins, Los Angeles Rams win, Atlanta wins or Tampa Bay wins, Arizona wins, Atlanta wins, Tampa Bay win. Everybody got that? Washington is knocked out of NFC East title contention with a loss. Green Bay is knocked out of NFC North title contention with a loss, a Detroit win, or a Minnesota tie. Basically saying that the Green Bay Packers, regardless of what happens, will probably not win the NFC North. Nor will they win the 1 seed contention because they'll get knocked out if they lose, Detroit wins, Minnesota wins, or Philadelphia wins. Miami is eliminated from playoff contention with a loss or a Chargers win, or tie or a Chargers win. Cincinnati is eliminated from the playoffs if they lose, a Cincinnati tie or a Los Angeles Chargers win. Indianapolis is eliminated from playoff contention with a loss or a Chargers win, a Los Angeles Chargers win, a tie and a Los Angeles Chargers win. Baltimore is knocked out of AFC North title contention with a loss, obviously if Pittsburgh wins. Buffalo will be knocked out of 1 seed contention if Buffalo loses and Kansas City wins, or there's a Buffalo tie and a Kansas City win. And Pittsburgh will be knocked out of the 1 seed if Pittsburgh loses or Kansas City wins. So there you go. Those are the playoff clinching and elimination scenarios for this week. A lot of things we covered this week, and only 3 weeks left in the season, so we will see how the week transpires. And yeah. So that's going to do it for this episode of the NFL Network. I will probably do a live watch of the Steelers and Ravens game on Saturday. The AFC North Championship on the line in this game. So there'll probably be one for this coming up on this channel on Saturday. So be on the lookout for that. But we'll be back here next Tuesday because of Christmas, because of the Christmas game. So next Tuesday we'll have the new episode of the NFL Network. So Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to see some of the other videos I've done, check out some of the playlist episodes I've done, and last week's episode, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification button. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.